Most women wear white to a wedding, but I chose crimson. Someone had to dress for the bride's impending funeral. The man I'd spent 7 years building from a penniless stray into a corporate titan was marrying my half-sister, sealing his betrayal by demanding my literal flesh and blood as a wedding gift. He thought a lifetime marrow-harvesting contract and a psychiatric hold would break my spirit, unaware he'd just handed me the shovel to dig his grave. The bridal suite of the Valmont estate smelled nauseatingly of Casablanca lilies and expensive deceit. I stood adjusting the thin spaghetti straps of my blood-red silk slip dress, a scandalous, violent slash of color against the room's white tulle. The heavy oak door clicked shut. Vance stepped in, his tailored tuxedo barely hiding his cowardice. Behind him, clutching his arm, was Gwen, my terminally deceitful half-sister. She wore a Vera Wang gown that probably cost more than the first startup Vance and I built. She looked radiant, a thief. Vance offered no greeting. He tossed a leather-bound folder onto the glass vanity table. "Sign it," he commanded, his voice a forced baritone. I didn't reach for it. I met his gaze in the vanity mirror. His eyes, once warm with ambition, were now cold, defensive, shadowed with something pathetic. Guilt? No. Vance wasn't capable of guilt, just the inconvenience of managing my existence. "What is this, Vance?" I purred. Gwen peeked out, her lip trembling. "Blair, please don't make this hard. My anemia, my blood condition is worsening. Doctors say if I don't have a perfectly matched donor, the stress of pregnancy could kill me." I let out a low, melodic chuckle. A blood condition. How wonderfully dramatic. Gwen's only real condition was an acute allergy to seeing me happy. I opened the folder. The first document was a lifetime blood and bone marrow donation contract, stipulating I, Blair, would remain on call to be drained the moment Gwen felt faint. The second was a certificate of psychiatric evaluation, pre-signed by Valmont's chief of staff, diagnosing me with severe paranoid schizophrenia, detailing delusions of grandeur and obsessive fabrications regarding a non-existent romantic relationship with Mr. Vance. A masterpiece. If I signed it, I legally erased the last 7 years. I wasn't the woman who starved with him, sold her jewelry to pay his server fees, and mapped his empire. I was just a crazy stalker. "You want me to sign away my bodily autonomy and legally declare myself insane," I stated. Vance stepped closer, his cologne assaulting my senses. "It's a formality, Blair." He lied smoothly. "Gwen needs peace of mind for the baby, and the board needs to know my past associations won't be a liability. You've been acting erratic. It's for your own good." "And if I refuse?" I asked. Vance's expression hardened. "Then tomorrow, bulldozers roll into Cypress Hill Cemetery, that prime real estate where your mother is buried. My company acquired it. It would make a fantastic parking lot for our new resort." There it was, the knife to the throat. He expected me to drop to my knees, to weep, to beg him to spare the only thing I had left. He fed on my tears. But I didn't cry. My tear ducts felt as dry as desert dust. I looked down at my left hand. On my ring finger sat a cheap, tarnished silver band, too tight for years, digging into my flesh. I picked up the Mont Blanc pen. Without a tremor, I scrawled my signature across both pages. Blair, dark, sharp, binding. Vance exhaled a ragged breath of relief and triumph. Gwen smiled, sickeningly sweet. "Thank you, sister," Gwen cooed, reaching out. I sidestepped her touch. Slowly, I grabbed the cheap silver ring. With a sharp, agonizing twist, I yanked it off, tearing skin. I dropped the trinket onto the signed psychiatric evaluation. It landed with a pathetic clink. "Oh, we aren't quite finished, Gwen." I smiled warmly. I unclasped the vintage ruby brooch. The needle was sharp. Before they could react, I pressed the point into my bleeding finger. A gasp escaped Gwen as a thick, dark, ruby drop of my blood welled up. I grabbed a crystal flute of white wine and let the crimson fall. It hit the pale liquid, blooming instantly like a dark, venomous flower, corrupting the wine. I picked up the glass and shoved it into Gwen's hands. "Signed?" I whispered, my voice echoing. "Drink up, little sister." My blood is very nourishing, isn't it? That's what you wanted." Gwen stared at the pinkish liquid, her face draining, her delicate angel facade shattering into genuine revulsion. She looked at Vance for help, but he was frozen. I stepped closer, lips inches from Vance's ear. "May you two live a long life together," I breathed, venom seeping into every syllable, locked in each other's grasp for eternity. "Because the moment you let go, the devil is waiting." I pulled back, flashed a brilliant smile, turned, and walked out. The silence I left behind was heavier than a tombstone. The ceremony was grotesque. Thousands of white roses, Bach, a priest droning. I stood near the back, a blazing column of red. As Vance recited vows, his eyes kept darting to me. He looked panicked, deeply unsettled that I wasn't weeping. He had won, but looked like a man who swallowed glass. I didn't hold his gaze. My eyes shifted to the front row, to Jude, Gwen's uncle, the apex predator of the Valmont financial district, carved from marble and ruthlessness. Jude's gaze was entirely on me. Across 100 yards, our eyes locked. His expression unreadable, a cool, terrifying calm. His eyes burning with predatory intensity. I didn't look away. A microscopic smirk touched my lips. Jude's jaw tightened, and he raised his champagne flute, tapping the rim against his lower lip in a silent, private toast. The game was on. The reception bled into early morning. By 2 a.m., the elite had retired. I was assigned a cramped room at the end of the servants' corridor, a final, petty humiliation. It was perfect. Downstairs, Vance was drunk. He desperately tried to drown the gnawing sensation in his gut. He was king, but all he could think about was the drop of blood in the wine glass and the terrifying emptiness in my eyes. He needed me to break. My pain validated his superiority. Without my suffering, his victory tasted like ash. Stumbling past the master suite, Vance bypassed his honeymoon. Driven by alcohol, rage, and twisted possessiveness, he navigated the dark corridor. He reached my door, slammed his fist, and kicked it open. "Blair, don't think you can just act high and mighty today. I know you're in here crying. His words died. The room was dimly lit. I wasn't crying. I was by the window in a silk robe, calmly brushing my hair. But that wasn't what caused the blood to drain from Vance's face, leaving him like a corpse. Sitting on the edge of my creaky bed, looking utterly out of place, yet entirely in command of the universe, was Jude, Gwen's uncle, the man Vance had spent 3 years groveling to please. Jude leaned back, his jacket discarded, lazily buttoning his crisp white shirt, exposing a glimpse of a muscular, scarred chest. Jude didn't flinch. He merely tilted his head, his dark eyes fixing on Vance with detached curiosity. The silence stretched, thick and suffocating. Jude finally broke it, his voice a low, gravelly purr. "Nephew-in-law," Jude drawled, his lips curling into a smile that lacked warmth. "Abandoning your beautiful bride on your wedding night to crash your elder's spring night." Jude stood up, his imposing frame dominating the small room. He stepped toward Vance. "Tell me, Vance, are you simply tired of breathing, or are you in a rush to meet your maker? Living with people who destroyed you is a masochist's game. Convincing them they hold the leash is a predator's masterpiece. My sister thought demoting me to a scullery maid would break my mind, oblivious that a servant holds master keys to a marriage's vulnerable shadows. The Valmont dynasty wasn't going to collapse from corporate takeover. It was going to rot from the inside out, fueled by a single strand of my auburn hair. Vance tried to banish me the morning after our encounter with Jude. But Jude, radiating terrifying authority, declared, "Family belongs under one roof." Vance, indebted and terrified, swallowed the mandate. The gilded cage was locked. Gwen embraced her new role as Lady of the Manor with the grace of a toddler with a loaded handgun. She issued petty decrees from velvet chaise lounges, claiming anemia. "Blair, the marble in the grand foyer looks terribly dull." Gwen sighed, examining her nails as I passed with laundry. "Use a toothbrush. The grout needs personal attention." I knelt. "Of course, Mrs. Valmont," I murmured, saccharine warmth in my voice. A dirty foundation can bring down the entire house after all. I hit a venomous curve of my lips. She thought labor was punishment. She didn't understand making me invisible, gave me unrestricted access. 4 hours at the spa for her, 4 minutes in her sanctuary for me. My warfare required no raised voices, only props. A spritz of my signature perfume on Vance's overcoat, enough to linger in his Bentley. A single auburn hair, plucked and draped across Vance's silk pillowcase. I didn't have to seduce her husband. I just had to make her certain someone else already had. The corrosion happened faster than anticipated. Whispered arguments escalated into echoing screams. I was in the conservatory, deadheading roses, when a crystal vase shattered above me. "Who is she, Vance?" Gwen's shriek bled through the floorboards. "I smell her on your skin. I found her hair in my bed." "You are insane, Gwen. You're seeing ghosts," Vance roared back. Another crash, something heavy splintering. I closed my eyes, savoring the chaotic symphony. They were doing my job. The venom was in their bloodstream. They were tearing out each other's throats. Gwen's paranoia mutated into an obsessive need for proof. She stopped sleeping, her face gaunt, eyes manic. She secretly purchased a nanny cam, concealing it in an encyclopedia in Vance's study. 3 agonizing days. On a rainy Tuesday night, she retrieved the memory card, her hands shaking as she plugged it into her laptop. She expected to catch me, or Vance with a mistress. Instead, the grainy, night vision footage revealed a horror far more profound. 3:17 a.m. Vance was alone in the study, pacing frantically behind his desk, tie discarded, posture feral. In his hand, the cheap, tarnished silver ring I had abandoned. Gwen held her breath, nails digging into her palms as she turned up the volume. Vance stopped pacing, collapsed into his chair, pressing the ring to his lips. He rocked, staring blankly. "I didn't mean it, Blair," he whispered to the empty room, a chilling, hollow rasp. "I had to cage you to keep you here, but I'm still yours. I've always been yours. Just tell me you know I'm yours." Gwen stared at the screen, a cold, paralyzing dread stopping her heart. Her husband wasn't having a physical affair. He was incurably possessed by the ghost of the woman at the end of the hall. The most dangerous weapon in a dying marriage isn't a loaded gun, but pink lines on a stolen plastic stick. My sister, losing her grip on her husband's sanity, anchored him with a phantom air. She thought weaponizing a fictional fetus would bury me. She just handed me the excuse to climb directly into the devil's bed. Gwen's performance was Oscar-worthy. During Sunday brunch, she stood to toast, touched her temple, and collapsed into Vance's arms. By sunset, the estate buzzed. The frail, anemic bride was carrying the next generation. I stood in the parlor, holding fresh towels, watching Vance pace. He looked like a hostage handed heavier chains, his eyes darting toward Gwen, pale and triumphant on a chaise lounge. "The doctor said absolute bed rest," Gwen whispered. "And my blood levels are dangerously low, Vance. The baby is taking everything. I'm so scared." Vance stopped pacing, his gaze locking onto me. The air curdled. I saw the rusted gears turning in his paranoid mind. He needed an outlet for his anxiety, a way to exert control. I, bound by a blood contract, was his favorite punching bag. He crossed the room, stopping inches from my face. "You're moving to the sub-basement tonight," Vance hissed. "The old wine cellar. No windows, no drafts, no distractions. You will remain sterile, rested, and on standby. If my wife or child needs a transfusion, you will be ready." "The cellar?" I let a tremor enter my voice, eyes widening. "Vance, please. It's freezing. It's practically a dungeon." "It's an incubator," he snapped, his breath sour. He leaned closer, eyes flashing dominance. "You signed the contract, Blair. You belong to this family's survival. Pack your things." I lowered my head, letting a single tear slide down my cheek for his viewing pleasure. He exhaled sharply, feeding on my despair, blind to the triumphant smile blooming in the shadows of my bowed face. The basement was a concrete tomb, the perfect stage for a desperate woman to break. At midnight, as the thunderstorm rattled the iron grates, I enacted the next phase. I wrapped myself in a thin, soaked shawl, picked the cellar lock with a hairpin, and slipped out into the torrential rain. I ran across the lawns toward the secluded East Wing guest house, Jude's sanctuary. I pounded on the heavy oak door, my knuckles raw, hair plastered. The door swung open, revealing Jude framed against the warm glow of a roaring fireplace. He held a crystal tumbler. He didn't look surprised. He looked like a spider feeling its web vibrate. "Little bird," Jude drawled, his voice a gravelly vibration cutting through the thunder. "Are you lost, or tired of playing martyr in the mud?" "Help me," I gasped, teeth chattering. "He locked me in the cellar. He's going to bleed me dry for her. Please, Jude, you're the only one he fears." Jude closed the heavy door. He sipped his whiskey, his black eyes raking my trembling form with the cold calculation of an appraiser. "Valmont men are protective of their property," Jude murmured, walking around me. "If I pull you from Vance's dungeon, I become his direct enemy. Why disrupt my niece's happy home for a ghost from his past?" I looked up, letting the mask of victim slip. I met his predatory gaze. "Because we both know you don't care about Gwen's happy home, and because I can give you the one thing Vance never will." Jude stopped. He reached out, his thumb tracing my jaw, tilting my face. The air cracked with dark, unspoken promises. "And what is that, Blair?" he whispered, pressing lightly against my pulse. "Absolute surrender," I breathed, staring into his eyes. "Be my patron. Be my shield. Claim me, and Vance won't dare touch a hair on my head." A slow, terrifyingly beautiful smile spread across Jude's face. He wrapped his hand around my neck, his grip firm. "Charity is for the church, Blair. If I take you in, you aren't a refugee. You're mine. You live in my shadow. You breathe when I tell you to, and you belong exclusively to me. Deal?" I whispered against his lips. The next morning, the dining room was domestic warfare. Vance sat haggardly. Gwen daintily nibbled toast, basking in fictitious maternity. The mahogany doors swung open. Vance's coffee spoon clattered. Gwen stopped chewing. I walked into the sunlit room, no longer in drab servant's gray. I wore an emerald green silk blouse and a pristine white skirt, radiant, rested, dangerously untouchable. Walking 2 steps behind me, his hand resting casually, proprietarily on the small of my back, was Jude. Vance stood so fast, his oak chair crashed. Blood drained from his face. His eyes darted wildly from my relaxed smile to Jude's possessive hand. "What is the meaning of this?" Vance choked out, trembling with rage and terror. "Blair is supposed to be in the annex." Jude didn't look at him. He pulled out a chair for me, then turned his cold, obsidian gaze onto Vance. "Blair's accommodations were unacceptable," Jude stated, his tone mild, yet carrying the weight of a guillotine. "I've decided to take her under my direct patronage. She will be assisting me with my private affairs. You won't be needing her in your cellar." "She's a medical necessity for my wife," Vance shouted, knuckles white. He was unraveling. The woman he hoarded was now the prized possession of the billionaire who owned his company's debt. "If my dear niece requires medical attention," Jude replied, unfolding his napkin, "I will fly in the finest hematologists. But Blair's veins are no longer available for your domestic withdrawals. Do we have an understanding, nephew?" Vance swallowed hard. He looked at Gwen, then back to Jude. The fight left his body, replaced by impotence. "Yes, Uncle Jude," he mumbled. For 2 weeks, Vance lived in psychological purgatory. He watched as Jude and I walked the gardens, my laughter ringing out a sound Vance hadn't heard in years. He watched Jude drape his jacket over my shoulders. Jealousy ate at his brain. He missed board meetings, fumbled crucial negotiations, too busy staring at security feeds, trying to glimpse me entering Jude's wing. He was bleeding out, and I hadn't drawn a knife. The charade's climax arrived on Gwen's heavily publicized prenatal checkup. Vance escorted her, looking more like a pallbearer than a father-to-be. Gwen was glowing, clutching her flat stomach, enjoying VIP treatment from the chief of obstetrics. Vance stood in the sterile corridor, rubbing his temples, warding off a migraine. He didn't notice my heels until I was beside him. I wore a white trench coat, holding an oversized crocodile tote. I walked past him, close enough for Amber and Jasmine to flood his senses, for our shoulders to brush. With the sleight of hand of a seasoned pickpocket, I slipped a slim, unmarked manila folder into his overcoat pocket. I paused 2 steps away, turning my head to look over my shoulder. Vance was frozen, eyes wide, hand instinctively flying to the foreign weight in his pocket. I offered him a sweet, sympathetic smile. "Guess what, Vance?" I whispered, my voice echoing in the sterile hallway. "If the ultrasound is rigged, and the pregnancy is entirely fake," my eyes drifted to the closed door where his wife lay. What exactly is growing inside her swelling belly? I turned and walked toward the elevators, my heels leaving him drowning in an icy ocean of absolute horror. Treason is a dish best served with fabricated medical records. The man who built his glass castle on my loyalty discovered his crowned queen was barren, inflating her womb with black market hormones while bleeding his empire dry. He crawled through the mud, begging salvation, unaware the weeping angel stroking his hair was his apocalypse's architect. The hospital bathroom's fluorescent light flickered as Vance locked himself in a stall, hands shaking. He expected compromising photos. Instead, he found a meticulously documented autopsy of his fragile new marriage. The first page: Gwen Valmont, severe uterine scarring, irreversible infertility, dated 3 years prior from a private Swiss clinic. The second: bank statements and encrypted emails detailing Gwen's exorbitant purchases of HCG injections, a synthetic hormone cocktail, mimicking pregnancy. Vance stared, oxygen leaving his lungs. No air, no medical emergency. The frail bride he sacrificed his dignity and my sanity for was a hollow, manipulative parasite. Before the betrayal registered, his phone vibrated. An urgent alert from his CFO. Jude's conglomerate had executed a hostile buyout of Vance's primary supply chain. The 10% acquisition Vance neglected had triggered a catastrophic margin call. His company was hemorrhaging. Stripped of his legacy, chained to a pathological liar, Vance did what I knew he would. He sought his only known foundation. It was nearly midnight when rain hammered the east wing windows. I sat by the roaring fireplace in Jude's library, casually turning Machiavelli pages, when the oak doors burst open. Vance stood drenched, his expensive suit plastered to his shivering frame. The arrogant corporate titan was gone, replaced by a pathetic, drowning rat. He stumbled, leaving muddy water on the Persian rug, and collapsed to his knees before my armchair. "Blair," he choked out, tearing from his throat like a sob. He clutched my silk cardigan. "You were right. God, Blair, you were right about her. She's empty. She's sick. She's been injecting herself to fake the pregnancy. And Jude is destroying the firm." I didn't pull away. I looked down, projecting boundless empathy. Inside, dark, venomous laughter echoed. The king, crying over his ruined castle, begging the dragon for water. "Oh, Vance," I whispered, my voice dripping with honeyed sorrow. I threaded my fingers through his soaking hair. He leaned into the touch instantly, a starved dog taking a scrap. "I was a fool," he wept, pressing his face into my cardigan. "I'll divorce her. I'll throw her in a psych ward. I'll transfer the remaining assets back to you, Blair. Just help me fix this. Come back to me." I stroked his hair. "Hush now. You don't need to fight anymore. I'll handle everything. I'll help you." He looked up, bloodshot eyes swimming with pathetic hope. "You will?" "Of course I will," I smiled, a curve that didn't reach my eyes. "Now go back to the main house. Act perfectly normal. Don't let her know you've seen the files until the lawyers draft the papers. Leave the rest to me." Vance nodded frantically, intoxicated by absolution. He kissed my hand, pushed off the floor, and hurried into the storm, reborn on absolute delusion. I waited until the door clicked shut. The angelic smile vanished, replaced by cold, razor-sharp apathy. I stood, shrugging off the damp cardigan Vance had tainted. Without a second glance, I tossed it into the roaring fireplace. The silk hissed and shriveled, consumed by flames. From the library's shadows, a low, appreciative chuckle vibrated. Jude stepped into the firelight, holding 2 glasses of bourbon. He handed one to me, stepping into my space, his imposing frame radiating dark, intoxicating heat. He wrapped his arm around my waist, pulling me flush against his chest, resting his chin on my shoulder. "You are a terrifying creature, Blair," Jude murmured, his breath warm against my neck. "He practically thanked you for loading the gun." I sipped the bourbon. "He's predictable. Men who build their egos on women's sacrifices always expect those women to clean up the wreckage." 12 months, Jude mused, his hand trailing lazily down my hip. 12 months since you walked into my office, handed me Gwen's infertility records, and proposed this delightful bloodbath, forcing my idiotic nephew to marry that viper just so you could lock them both in the same cage. The execution has been flawless. "I told you I wasn't looking for a settlement, Jude," I replied, leaning back. "I was looking for an execution. Vance needs to lose his mind, and Gwen needs to be the one holding the scalpel." "Speaking of the viper," Jude said, a cruel smirk audible. "Did you send the email? An hour ago?" I confirmed. I'd bypassed the firewall and anonymously forwarded a drafted asset transfer document to Gwen's iPad, outlining Vance's intention to strip her of everything and sign his remaining holding company to me. Across the rain-slicked grounds, in the main house's kitchen, Gwen stood in the dark. Her manicured hands shook violently, staring at her glowing iPad. The illusion of her grand victory shattered. Vance knew. Worse, Vance was going to leave her penniless and crawl back to the sister she despised. A psychotic desperation took hold. She moved mechanically to the pantry, retrieving a small, unmarked glass vial of arsenic powder. Tasteless, odorless, fatal. She poured a glass of milk, warmed it Vance's preferred way when stressed, and methodically stirred in a lethal dose. The spoon clinked softly, a morbid countdown. Upstairs in the master study, Vance sat behind his desk, pretending to review reports, heart-hammering, waiting for morning to unleash his lawyers. The door creaked open. Gwen glided in, face pale, eyes unnervingly bright. She wore a flowing white nightgown, playing the devoted pregnant wife to the last second. "You've been working so hard, darling," Gwen cooed, her voice brittle. She set the warm milk on his desk. "Drink this, it will help you sleep." Vance looked at her, fighting the urge to vomit. He forced a tight, artificial smile. "Thank you, Gwen, you're always looking out for me." He reached for the glass, fingers wrapping around the warm crystal. He brought it up, inches from his lips. He'd take a small sip to maintain the facade. Bzz. His cell phone, face up, lit the dim room with a harsh blue glare. A text message. From me. Vance's eyes darted to the screen. The preview displayed a single, chilling sentence. "Don't drink the milk. She's trying to kill you." Vance froze. The glass hovered millimeters from his mouth. The air in the study turned to liquid nitrogen. Slowly, deliberately, Vance lowered the poisoned milk. He didn't look at the glass. He lifted his head and locked his eyes directly onto Gwen's. The mask of the tired husband evaporated, replaced by cold, absolute, murderous clarity. The Game of Thrones had abandoned the shadows. The massacre was about to begin. A prison without walls is the hardest to escape. My sister thought she was lacing her husband's milk with widowhood. She didn't realize I'd infected his mind with a lethal toxin. Paranoia is a magnificent inferno. Strike the match, pour Bordeaux, and watch the roaches burn each other for ashes. The standoff in the study ended with suffocating silence. Vance hadn't touched the poisoned milk. He simply stared at Gwen with the dead eyes of prey. He slowly picked up the glass, walked to the ficus plant, and poured the white liquid into the soil. Gwen hadn't said a word. She backed out, her mask cracking. 3 days later, the ficus plant withered to a husk. The Valmont estate devolved into a multi-million-dollar asylum. I didn't lift a finger to punish them. Their own guilty consciences did the heavy lifting. From Jude's luxurious East Wing, sharing his bed, I watched the main house's security feeds like premium television, a masterclass in psychological decay. Vance dismissed the staff, convinced Gwen bribed the chef to poison him. He barricaded himself in guest quarters, pushing a dresser against the door nightly. The corporate shark now survived on canned peaches and sealed water bottles, sleeping with a brass fire poker under his pillow, jumping at wind. Meanwhile, Gwen rotted in the master suite, her fictitious pregnancy, a forgotten prop. Her unraveling was accelerated by a gift Jude and I coordinated. While she paced the gardens, I strolled through her bedroom. I left a forged, officially stamped document on her vanity, an involuntary psychiatric commitment authorization for Gwendolyn Valmont, signed by her husband, Vance, due to violent psychotic delusions and homicidal ideation. A poetic echo of the document they tried to force on me. When Gwen found it, the cameras captured her sanity snapping. She didn't cry. She stopped breathing for 10 seconds, crumpling the parchment. She realized Vance wasn't just divorcing her. He was locking her in a padded cell before she could expose him. That night, Gwen descended the grand staircase like a ghost. She entered the formal dining room, removed a wickedly sharp silver fruit knife from a velvet-lined drawer, slid it up her sleeve, and retreated to the shadows. They were two cornered animals, sharing a roof, convinced the other was coming for their throat. It was time to force their hands. On the fifth night, a heavy storm drowned the estate in torrential rain. I left Jude reading by the fireplace, slipped into a sleek black raincoat, and went to the subterranean utility room. The master breaker panel. I bypassed the security lock with the code Vance foolishly trusted me with 3 years ago. I placed my gloved hand on the heavy, red, main lever. I took a deep breath, savoring the power of playing God, and pulled it down. The heavy mechanical thunk echoed. Instantly, the 70-room mansion plunged into suffocating, pitch-black abyss. Upstairs, the darkness was the final catalyst. In the guest quarters, Vance shot up. The blackout wasn't a power grid failure. Gwen cut the lights. She was coming for him. He grabbed the heavy brass fire poker and crept out into the pitch-black hallway, ragged, terrified gasps. At the exact same moment, Gwen gripped the silver fruit knife so tightly her palm bled. Vance cut the power. He was coming to drag her to the asylum. If she was caged, she'd send him to the morgue first. They stalked toward each other through the ink-black grand foyer, guided only by strobing lightning flashes. It was pathetic. They weren't trained killers. They were pampered, cowardly narcissists, driven by self-preservation. Another lightning flash. Vance saw the glint of the silver blade. Gwen saw the heavy brass poker raised. A primal scream tore from Gwen's throat as she lunged. Vance swung blindly, missing her head but catching her hard in the shoulder. A sickening crunch of bone was masked by thunder. Gwen shrieked, dropping to her knees, but adrenaline propelled her. She tackled him. They crashed onto the marble floor in a tangle of limbs and curses. "You crazy bitch!" Vance roared, dropping the poker, wrapping his large hands around Gwen's slender throat. He squeezed with repressed rage and terror. "You tried to poison me. You're empty. You're nothing." Gwen's eyes bulged, gasping for air. Her legs thrashed weakly. Her right hand was free. Her fingers scrambled across the cold floor, searching. The silver handle of the fruit knife brushed her knuckles. She gripped it tight. With the last ounce of oxygen, Gwen drove the 6-inch blade blindly upward, sinking it deep into the vulnerable flesh between Vance's ribs. Vance's scream was horrific, wet. His grip vanished. He collapsed backward, clutching his bleeding side. Gwen rolled away, hacking and coughing violently, hands covered in his warm blood. The foyer was silent, save for their synchronized wheezing and the drumming rain. Gwen dragged her body across the marble, leaving a smear of Vance's blood. She reached the antique console table, pulled down the landline. Her hands shook violently. She dialed the only number that mattered, the only man with power to make a bleeding husband and murder charge disappear. She dialed her uncle. In Jude's library, his private cell phone vibrated. Jude was upstairs, shower running faintly. I sat perfectly still on the velvet sofa, wearing his oversized white dress shirt, buffing my nails. I looked at the glowing screen. Incoming call, Gwen. A slow, terrifyingly serene smile spread. I picked up, pressed green, listening to frantic, wet, hyperventilating sobs. "Uncle Jude!" Gwen shrieked, her voice a mangled croak. "Uncle Jude, please, help me! Vance! Vance tried to kill me! I had to defend myself. He's bleeding, there's so much blood. You have to send someone, please. You have to save me." I let her cry for 5 full seconds, savoring the terror. "Oh, sweetie," I murmured, my voice dripping with soft, melodic, lethally polite syrup. The sobbing stopped, replaced by a horrified, suffocated gasp of recognition. "Uncle Jude is currently in the shower," I whispered, tracing my wine glass rim. "But I'd be more than happy to take a message. Tell me, sister, do you need me to call an ambulance? Or should I just go ahead and order the hearse?" True revenge isn't about standing over a fresh grave. It's paying the monthly invoice for the padded cell where your enemies spend eternity thanking you. My sister and ex-husband thought they fought a war for survival, oblivious their battlefield was a terrarium I built on Jude's desk. As I signed the final asset transfer deeds, absorbing the empire Vance bled me dry to build, I almost felt a twinge of pity that his greatest comfort in the asylum is the very monster who put him there. The authorities arrived to a perfectly curated scene. Gwen survived her wound, Vance survived strangulation, but neither survived the legal and financial slaughter. Police interrogations. Vance babbled incoherently about poisoned milk, fake pregnancies, invisible assassins. It didn't take much for the district attorney, heavily persuaded by Jude's donations, to declare Vance unfit for trial. He was quietly swept away into the state sanatorium's fortified psychiatric wing. Gwen's fate was less sterile. Stripped of her fictional heir, abandoned by her uncle, legally burdened with Vance's catastrophic debt after Jude's hostile takeover, she was evicted from high society circles. The Valmont dynasty was eradicated, the estate transferred to Jude's portfolio, with me as its new mistress. The private psychiatric facility smelled of lavender bleach and sedatives. I walked down the corridor, my Louboutin heels echoing, counting down Vance's dignity. I carried a small, covered plastic tray. Vance sat in a wheelchair, facing a reinforced window. He wore a shapeless gray tracksuit. The arrogant corporate titan was gone. His posture slumped, jaw slack, eyes clouded by chemical fog. I pulled up a plastic chair. I peeled the foil lid off lukewarm vanilla pudding. "Hello, Vance," I murmured, my voice soft as a velvet noose. He blinked, turning his head. It took seconds for his medicated brain to process my face. When it clicked, a watery, desperate light flooded his vacant eyes. He let out a ragged gasp, reaching with shaking hands, grabbing fistfuls of my expensive silk skirt. "Blair," he wept, tears spilling. You came back for me." "Of course I did," I smiled, a gentle maternal expression concealing dark, roaring laughter. I scooped pudding to his lips. "Open up, darling. Keep your strength." He parted his lips, swallowing the bland paste like ambrosia. He choked on a sob, dirty fingernails digging into my skirt. "She was crazy, Blair. Gwen. She tried to kill me. She took everything. I should have never left you. You're the only one who truly cared about me. My only angel." He leaned forward clumsily, burying his face in my lap, weeping into the silk. He pressed his chapped lips to my hand, kissing my knuckles with sickening, reverent worship. I looked down at his thinning hair. He sat in a cage I built, eating from my hand, praising my mercy, the pinnacle of psychological domination. "Shh." I hushed him, gently stroking his back, savoring the shudder of relief. "Don't think about Gwen. She can never hurt you again. You're safe here, Vance. I'll always be watching over you. Forever." He sobbed harder. A broken, grateful animal, oblivious his guardian angel was the devil who clipped his wings. I left the pudding, extracted my hand, and promised to return. I walked down the sterile corridors, the asylum's suffocating atmosphere sliding off as I pushed through the exit doors into crisp autumn air. I paused at the top of the concrete steps, slipping on my sunglasses. Below, near the parking lot, a hunched figure aggressively scrubbed pavement with a stiff bristled brush. She wore a coarse janitorial uniform. Her platinum blonde hair was brittle, greasy, tied back with a frayed elastic. Gwen paused, scrubbing to wipe sweat. Her hollow, sunken eyes drifted upward and locked onto me. For a split second, the universe stood still. I stood, draped in emerald silk and cashmere, looking down like a deity surveying an insect. The realization hit her like a physical blow. The manicured hands that held crystal champagne flutes were now raw, blistered, plunged into industrial bleach just to pay for a cot. She saw the terrifying clarity in my posture. She finally understood. This wasn't bad luck. It was an execution. A primal, ear-piercing shriek tore from Gwen's throat. She dropped the brush, face contorting into pure hatred, and lunged toward the steps, hands curling into claws. She didn't make it past the second step. Before I flinched, Jude's massive stone-faced bodyguard materialized. He casually intercepted Gwen's charge, planting a heavy Oxford shoe squarely in her chest. He shoved her backward with effortless, dismissive force. Gwen flew backward, arms flailing, and crashed hard into the pavement. She slid through the puddle of dirty scrub water, her uniform soaking, cheeks scraping concrete. She lay there in the mud, gasping for air, weeping hysterically, too broken to get back up. I didn't say a word. She wasn't worth the oxygen. I adjusted my coat, stepped over the puddle, and walked to the idling, pitch-black Rolls-Royce Phantom. The heavy door swung open. The interior smelled of rich leather and cedar. Jude waited in the back seat, a crystal tumbler of scotch. His dark eyes swept over me, gleaming with predatory, possessive pride. I slid into the plush seat as the door clicked shut, sealing us in our impenetrable fortress. I opened my designer tote, pulled out a wet wipe, and methodically cleaned the hand Vance had wept upon. I scrubbed until it was pink, erasing every microscopic trace of his pathetic existence. "Did the patient enjoy his lunch?" Jude drawled, his deep voice rumbling. I tossed the soiled wipe into the discreet waste bin. I leaned back against the leather, resting my head against Jude's shoulder. I let my hand drop, resting it casually, deliberately, over my perfectly flat stomach. I turned my head, offering Jude a slow, radiant, terrifyingly beautiful smile. "The trash has finally been taken out," I murmured, staring into the dark, bottomless abyss of his eyes. "Now, I think I'd like a real child of our own."